Cool. So what I want to share with you guys is about the Enneagram. And I think it's particularly appropriate for this group because fundamentally the Enneagram is a system of spiritual development. Most of the time it's positioned as a personality test, right? And people take that and then they're like, oh, this is my type, I'm a whatever thing, and that means I'm just like this. Well, there exist personality tests like Myers-Briggs that you take and you test out, and that's what you are, and you're going to stay that for the rest of your life. Like, it's descriptive. The Enneagram really is saying which of 9 different flavors of journey your soul has selected for your return to the divine. And all of it is based around, in the incarnation, your soul chose to disconnect from one aspect of the divine, most, and in that disconnected, it makes a personality fixation, like a contraction, that then causes you problems because the human says, oh my God, I'm disconnected from the divine. I have to do it. And all the things that the human tries to do to recreate that experience fundamentally move you further from the divine. So the gift of the Enneagram is to say that pattern, whatever it is that I've been running, is fundamentally a description of what I am not. I am pure divine light, source energy. I am. And everything about the Enneagram pattern that I run is my distraction, but it also points exactly to what I can reconnect for my journey back to the divine. So it's way more than some personality test. Right? So there are 9 different types that represent 9 different flavors of disconnection, right? And we all contain all of them. Like we get to play all of them, but we usually have one that's our default mode. But there's also within the Enneagram this idea that nothing is ever static. When you look at the Enneagram circle, there's first of all the circle itself represents the law of one. Oneness, one source, one universe, we are all one, and so on. And then inside of that is the triangle, and the triangle represents the law of 3, which says fundamentally, in a world of duality, there's always a third option. We feel like it's black and white, but there's always something in between. And the people who test out on one of those 3 points are most likely to constantly be moving back and forth and be a little tough to tell where they're coming from, because they're always going, well, is it this or that? Oh, I'm all of it. The other lines in the Enneagram that kind of go do, right, is called the law of 7. And the law of 7 is that all things are always in motion. Nothing is ever done, complete, ended. It's always in motion in a dynamic expression. So those lines inside the Enneagram where the numbers are connected indicate, although we have kind of our home base, when we get stressed, we go along those lines and actually start acting out as a lower expression of a different type. Or when we really, really start to integrate, we move along those lines and we have access to the highest expression of additional types. So a lot of the study of the Enneagram is about how these movements fit together. And fundamentally, it's a tool of self-exploration. I have so many people that are like, well, I want to know if my son is a 5 or a 7, right? I want to know if my husband is a this or a that. Um, and I admit that for me, it's been super useful as kind of a very high level social, how can I approach interacting with somebody, right? I can usually, within a few minutes, kind of get an idea of this person's one of 2 or 3 types. And it tells me like what I can talk to them about, what they're most interested in. Do they want me to ask about their kids, or do they probably want me to ask about their hobbies and where they've been recently? And so I use it that way, but it's not something that like then I assume that they fit in that box all the time and they're always going to act like this and they should fix that about themselves so that they can, da 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 da. It really is much more about recognizing in ourselves, oh, this is the pattern that my psyche most often runs to actually distract me from source. And then when I start to see that pattern show up, oh gosh, I did that yesterday. Oh gosh, I just did that in the meeting I left. Oh gosh, I'm doing it now. Then we start to have access to making new choices. And one of my favorite questions is that your type or is that your truth? Right? Because I can look at something where the little voice in my head says something, and I'm like, yeah, but that's all the stuff that's not true. That's all the stuff that's distracting me further from source. When I recognize it's not true, like any shadow, you shine the light on it and it just goes away. And then what remains is something that's much more authentic. So that's kind of an overview of why I get so excited about this. Also, the fact that there's only 9 types. Right? This is a manageable number to be useful in real life. And it's coming from a lot of background information, ancient wisdom, like the diagram with the law of 7. If you take the number 1 and you divide it by 7, it actually is an infinite repeating number that is that diagram. 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7. 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7. Like it repeats infinitely and it follows that diagram. So I don't have to invent all the stuff behind it. There are all kinds of resources that I can pull on and direct people to. There are books about the Christian Enneagram, and there are books about the Kabbalistic Enneagram, and there are books about non-dual Enneagram. So there's a lot of richness behind it that just adds to it and makes it more accessible to more people. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I have this really, really exciting diagram. It's like I used this in my my meetup, but it's not, it's not that fancy. Can we make you guys big again over on the other screen? All right. Can you see it? Okay, cool. So the idea is that if we start with the core of being, source, oneness, so on, and you think of it as having like a diamond with 9 facets, right? When we disconnect from whatever facet, that's as we incarnate, that's what kind of sets the type in motion. So is it nature? Is it nurture? Big question. My belief is it's a soul choice. And it's a setup because what will happen is that baby will come into an environment And, on little tiny baby level, something might happen like mom is angry at whatever and sets baby down. It has nothing to do with baby, right? But mom just sets baby down. Well, a child that has come in ready to be a type 8 will start to build in, the hell is wrong with mom, right? A child that's come in ready to build a type 1 will go, wow, I wonder what's wrong with me that mom doesn't want me. So that same event gets interpreted in a way that actually starts to reinforce and build the type. So the suffering that gets created by that is called the passion of the type. So the passions that are in the descriptions tend to be a little bit old-fashioned words. So sometimes it takes a little bit of interpretation to make sense of them for now. So I'm just going to use my type as an example going through this, and then we'll have plenty of time for you guys to ask about how yours works as well. So I run mostly a type 5. I no longer say I am a type 5 because that's false. Right? So I run mostly type 5 energy, and the fundamental thing behind a type 5 is there's not enough to go around. Right? Specifically, there's not enough of me to go around. And that can get created either by a parent who's unavailable, and so the child is neglected, so there's not enough parent attention, or a parent who's really intrusive, like in your face all the time, wanting to play with the baby, wanting to carry the baby, and the baby's like, oh, I need a break. Right? It's too intrusive. There's not enough of me to keep mom happy. So my example of that is actually from when I was a little bit older. Food has never been a big hobby of mine. And I grew up drinking milk. I could have my glass of milk and not need any other food. Well, my mom followed Dr. Spock. And according to Dr. Spock, children need to eat. And if your children does not eat, it will die. So my mother did not want me to die. So she would hold my nose until my mouth opened and then put food in. I'm going to claim this was a little bit intrusive to the child, right? Totally coming from love, right? You guys haven't had a chance to meet my mom, but everybody loves my mom. I love my mom. She was doing the best she could. So with this sense of there's an intrusive world and there's not enough of me to take care of all of it, the type 5 goes into, I better hold on to all of me that I can, right? I don't want to overschedule myself because I might run out of energy, right? Those networking things, I can only schedule one of those a day. Or, gosh, I don't want to invest in taking that vacation because it would take so much of my energy to replace the money. Or, whatever it might be, there's not going to be enough, so I'll hoard what I have. And fundamentally, it comes out in thought space because I'm a mind-based person in this model. I'm just a mind-based person. I'm going to own that one. So I have to get all the knowledge. I have to hoard all the knowledge. Like, I can't possibly forget anything. And I need to know all the details about the things because it's up to me to figure out how all the things fit together. So there's this sense of, a lot of times type 5s are known for, I just need to research one more thing. Right? Analysis paralysis is the thing for type 5s. And if they're really, really unhealthy, they will start withholding information, like in business meetings and so on, to make themselves important so they get attention because there wasn't enough growing up. So they will start to use information hoarding as their way to make things work. So the passion is around, they call it avarice. Like there's not enough. I've got to keep all of it. I don't dare leak anything. And then the coping to gather, especially information, and hold on to it is called retention. Right? So very much a retention kind of a style. Because if I could just hold on to enough, then there would be enough energy. Now, the truth is, of course, we are all elements of source. Source is infinite energy. Energy already is, and there's no need for me to hold it. But if I'm coming from this disconnection with source, it appears that I need to hold the energy. And you know what happens? The tighter I hold on to that knowledge, and the more that I try to grow it, and the more that I try to keep more pieces together, the further I am from relaxing into source. So specifically, the mechanism reinforces itself and makes it so I can't possibly get back. The defense mechanism for a type 5 is isolation. Like, oh, going to all those meetings really depletes me, so I'll stay home half the time. I really want to be able to work on my book, so I need to just stay home and isolate. In fact, maybe I'll go away for a writer's weekend. In fact, maybe I'll move to a mountain property that's an hour from the grocery store. Right? And I'm like, oh my God, I isolated to the point where I destroyed my life. Let's not do that anymore. So at some point, people get tired of their own story, right? They get tired of the fixation. They get tired of rerunning the same pattern. And they start to go, there's got to be a different way. And in the Enneagram, what happens is they learn about their type and they start to notice when the pattern is running itself. Self-observation shines the light on the shadow. And once you do that, it allows it to start to unwind. And they start to integrate. Body, mind, and gut are the three centers. And then the programming starts to peel off, and the contracted opinions and all the places where they've come to conclusions and so on start to peel off. And then the patterns of behavior start to release. And they call that phase type deconstruction, which is the most crazy ass experience you've ever had of no longer being anybody you recognize. Nothing makes sense. You're literally out of your head, or you're out of your pattern of everything that you've taken yourself to be, because you used to think that this fixation and the defense mechanism were who you were, right? I'm the kind of person who. And so as those things fall away, it's not who you are anymore. And so as I started to study this, when I was living up on the mountain, I would be like sitting at the computer working on something, and then I would find myself walking through the kitchen. I'm like, the hell? Why am I in the kitchen? I'm supposed to be working on something. And I would move myself back to the computer and sit down and get back at it. And it might be 20 minutes later, and I'm walking through the kitchen and going into the living room. Like, what the hell? Like there's literally so little egoic function that it flips in and out. And people often think they're like going crazy. It's pretty important to have support during that time. My story about it is that for all the issues that created my type that were around food, my body was moving me back into the food room to realize, like, there's enough food here. You can have it when you want it, and you don't have to have it when you want it. So that's my story about what was going on with that. But eventually, enough of it peels away that what's an authentic expression starts to come up and say, oh, you know what? I've moved so far off into isolation land. I really am ready for some community, or I really am ready to, take the next level or express in a new way. For type fives, it often comes through as generosity, wanting to teach. So teaching and coaching were like perfect evolutions for me. And then for me, coming down off the mountain and into Fresno and going, oh, this is not community, right? It was my recognition that I needed to leave that area. Like, I'm done here. It's complete. I need to go. So what happens is there's this holy idea that is the reflection of source that draws your type back toward wholeness. Right? So this holy idea for a type 5 is holy omniscience or holy transparency. So knowing that the truth is there's only one oneness, and all of us appearing as distinct separate individuals really are still expressing that oneness. We seem to have this skin boundary, but it's really transparent when you start to experience each other as also being expressions of oneness. It happens also in studying different areas of information, fields of thought. Like, oh, suddenly I can see where they call that cultural anthropology and they call that psychology and they call that spirituality, but it's kind of like all the same with the boundaries get a little shaky. It's transparent when I go from, here's the key for a type 5, knowledge, collecting and hoarding knowledge, to being in a state of knowing and just resting as source, as oneness in the knowing as it's called forth. So the ordinary mind gets transmuted by really contemplating the holy idea, and then the virtue of the heart can show through again, which for type 5 is technically non-attachment, but it's much clearer as generosity, right? There's more than enough. There's always the ability to give and be replenished from an endless source. So there's no reason for me to be attached or hoard anything. So that's when the heart virtue can show up as a natural consequence of the changing of the mental patterns. It doesn't do any good to go out and try to be generous when my actual internal experience is still, I'm going to be depleted. I'm going to run out. You can't try to do the virtue. You can contemplate the holy idea. Okay, the truth is, I'm not separate. The truth is, I'm everything that Source is. The truth is, Source is constantly regenerating as me. I can contemplate those, and it'll shift me so that the virtue simply expresses. So that's kind of the basic journey of how an Enneagram type comes into being and then is in itself the journey back to source. Yay! So,
Bravo! Holy cow!